Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Found Love in the Winds of Suna with Temari Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Gaara was safe. The Akatsuki had taken the Shukaku, but Gaara was safe. That was all that mattered. Naruto stared at his stoic friend and a small smile crossed his face. It wasn't often that someone you knew died and then was resurrected. But Jinchurikis don't work inside the realms of normal logic. They are living reminders that they shouldn't be alive, that no matter what, they should have been erased years ago. Human sacrifices weren't supposed to last as long as they had. But this train of thought wasn't helping any and Naruto knew that. Staring his friend in the eyes, Naruto raised his hand and offered it to Gaara. The redhead raised an eyebrow and used his sand to lift his hand and grasped Naruto's own firmly. Thank you, my friend, for saving my life. I am indebted to you. Temari and Kankuro stood behind their brother with grins on their faces. It wasn't often that Gaara showed this level of respect and warmth to anyone. Naruto merely nodded his head and clapped his hand on Gaara's shoulder. We have to go now, my friend. I'll see you again one day. As the rest of his group said their goodbyes and turned to walk away, a sudden cold feeling washed over Naruto and he turned to look at the form of Gaara several feet behind him. A foreboding sense of premonition washed over him and he didn't want to go home at the moment. Sakura, Kakashi, and the rest watched as he sprinted back over to Gaara and placed both hands on the Kazecage's shoulders, alerting many to how close they were and causing many to fall into defensive stances. The Godime Kazekage simply puzzled at the distressed look on his friend's face and unfolded his arms. What else do you need, Naruto? Ask, and if it's in my power, I shall help you. Gaara, I just had a bad feeling. I need you to promise me that if I ever need to, that I can come live here. I have a bad feeling about going back to Konoha, and I just don't know. Just say that I can come here if need be. A ghost of a smile crept onto Gaara's face and he clapped a hand on Naruto's right shoulder as Naruto dropped his own. Uzumaki Naruto, you are forever more welcome in Sunagaku. If you ever need help or refuge, we will welcome you with open arms. Naruto ducked his head and a single tear crawled down his face. At least, if worse ever came to worse, he was welcome in Gaara's village. Raising his head, he looked past his insomniac friend to the people of Suna and saw nothing but smiles and admiration. He closed his eyes again and stepped away from them all. He turned his head while walking away, and in the tiniest voice that carried on the wind, he whispered. Thank you all. I shall see you again soon. The mission to destroy Akatsuki did not go as planned. Jiraiya was able to live, but he lost an arm to pain. Sasuke and his hubby group had engaged Itachi and had not done very well. The gap between the brothers was still as wide as a canyon. Hubby had run away, carrying their wounded leader, and the Konoha nins had not been able to pursue. Their main concern was getting Jiraiya back to the village and having Tsunade fix him up. The mission was a failure. Better to regroup and come out alive, than to pursue a foe that could destroy them all. After much fussing and frantic crying from Tsunade over the stupidity of Jiraiya and his condition, the old hermit was fixed up and would be peeping on the girls again within months. Currently, he and Tsunade were sitting in the Hokage office with a very nervous Naruto. Tsunade cleared her throat and got his attention. Now Naruto, I want you to know that you're not in trouble. Jiraiya and I have something to tell you that will rock not only your world, but the foundation of Konoha as we know it. Naruto gulped and sat up straighter in his chair. He wasn't in trouble, but this had something to do with him and he couldn't really see it being a good thing. The shiver he had after they rescued Gaara all those months ago came back full force and the sense of foreboding was almost overpowering. Everything in him was telling him to bolt, but morbid curiosity wouldn't allow it. Signaling with his hand for her to continue, he readied himself. Naruto, this is about your parents, who they were, and what this means for you. A pin could have dropped and would have been heard with perfect clarity. The sound of inhalation broke the silence, and Naruto was seen gripping the handles of his chair so hard that his knuckles were white. My parents. Who were they? Jiraiya smiled at his apprentice, and he and Tsunade crossed the room to sit in chairs in front of Naruto. A conversation such as this demanded not that they be professional, but that they be compassionate to a boy who, for all intents and purposes, was like a grandchild to the both of them. Tsunade smiled and started again. Your parents, Naruto, were Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina, two of the most powerful ninja this village has ever seen. Namikaze, where have I heard that name before? It sounds so familiar. Jiraiya laughed and slapped the arm of his chair. It should sound familiar, brat, that's the name of your idol, the Yondaime Hokage. My father was the Yondaime Hokage. But, why was I never told? A sad smile came onto Tsunade's face as she patted his knee. Your parents didn't want you to get a big head, Naruto, because of who they were. They were humble people and expected you to be as well. It was your father's dying wish that you be seen as a hero, but we all see how that turned out. Your mother was beautiful, a loudmouth tomboy at heart, but a beautiful person. Despite the way you grew up, Naruto, you're one of the noblest people in Konoha by birth. Then why was I made to live like trash? I could have been adopted or something. Why did I have to be all alone? I don't think they wanted me to be all alone. Jiraiya sighed and sat back in his chair. A proud smile adorned his haggard face. Tell me, Naruto, do you know how you got that name? No. Your parents named you after a character in one of my books. I'm named after one of the characters in one of your perverted books. Great. That's just what I need to know now. Hey, that's not true. This was an earlier novel of mine that wasn't as well received. Your mother loved it though. It was a story of a brave warrior who became a hero to his village. In fact, it really resembled your life up till now. I wrote down the Toad Seer's prophecy and didn't realize it. This had piqued both Tsunade's and Naruto's interest, but only Tsunade had the voice to speak. Tell me, Jiraiya, how did it end? I never finished it. The publisher didn't like it, so I only got up to the point where the hero meets the villain pulling the strings behind the scenes and then nothing. The rest is a blank slate, Naruto. Your future is what you make of it. Do you have a picture of my parents? I want to see what they look like. The last two of the Sannin stood and motioned for him to follow them. We'll do you one better, brat. We'll show you your parents' house. Stepping out into the sun, Naruto realized how warm it was and tied his jacket around his waist. The black t-shirt he wore was just a little tight and showed off his toned body. Naruto wasn't mindful of the looks he was getting though. Today was one day he could care less. Today was the day he learned of his origins. Perhaps, just maybe, that premonition wasn't a bad thing after all. After marching through the village for what seemed like eternity, the trio stopped outside of a set of gates. Naruto stood in awe before his family's home, completely oblivious to the prodding of his two companions. Well, wouldn't you like to go inside and see what you have here? He merely nodded dumbly and padded after the two Sannin, up to the door and inside. Looking around, he noticed that the fact that his parents were humble people was very apparent. Instead of a clan house, it was a very quaint 4-bedroom home, just big enough for a couple wanting to start a family. It was a very homey place with leather furniture and wood floors, a fireplace, and a larger than average kitchen. Naruto spun round and round, taking it all in. He heard Jiraiya sigh and turned back to his sensei. You know, the last time I was here was right before you were born. I was in a bit of a slump and Minato and Kushina insisted that I stay with them until I was my normal, jolly self. I'd never seen them so happy, talking about what a great kid they were going to have. Hey, if they could only see the hellion you grew up to be, they'd have never been so upbeat. Tsunade and Naruto chuckled at his joke. Jiraiya was trying to be enlightening while sorting through his own memories. Your mother was beautiful, Naruto. Redheads are always feisty ones. You get your attitude from her. She never took shit from anybody, including me. She was always such a blast to be around. Minato, well, he's public knowledge. He was a prankster extraordinaire and a very powerful man. Of course, he wouldn't have amounted to anything without my training, but that's beside the point. I loved your parents as if they were my own children, and you, yourself, are my godchild. Then why didn't you come get me after it was all over? Naruto, I didn't step foot back in Konoha until that day you met me at the hot springs. You have no idea how shocked I was to see you. It was like looking at a fusion of Kushina and Minato, and yet, I didn't want to believe it. You couldn't be real. If you were alive, it was a painful reminder of duties that I had shirked. I'm sorry, Naruto. It's alright, Ero Sennin. I forgive you. I know all too well that the past is painful. Besides, meeting you in that way was a lot more fun and exciting than being raised by you. The three shared a laugh and eventually quieted back down. As he wiped the tears from his eyes, Naruto's vision settled on a photo of a red-headed woman and a blonde man, both in Junin uniform. Are they, is that them? Tsunade nodded and Naruto took the photo off the wall and sat in a chair, staring at it intently. He was indeed the vision of his mother in the face, while his hair and build resembled his father's. His chest began to ache and he had to set the picture down before he dropped it. Tsunade sat beside him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Now, don't cry. We have a lot of exploring to do and not much time to do it. We have a meeting with the council soon and you have to be there. What? Why? Because we're going to reinstate you as the last Namikaze. We have your father's and mother's will, your birth certificate, and several affidavits that say you are who you are. Unfortunately, for you to be reinstated as a clan after so long a period of inactivity, we'll need a majority vote from the council. After all, you've been registered as a ward of the state and an orphan since your birth. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Jiraiya nodded his head and clapped a hand on his shoulder. Just know, boy, that you've done a lot of good in your career as a ninja. Not many can do what you can. You're an asset to the village, and unless there are a lot of bigots and grudge holders on that council, then we'll have no problem. Now, what say we investigate the rest of this house? Naruto nodded and followed after them, a small frown on his face. That bad feeling was back again, and this time it was threatening to consume him. Tsunade had been arguing with the assembled council for a while now, and it was disheartening to say the least. Despite all the evidence, despite his shining military record, despite all he had done for the village, some still held a grudge against the fox and still saw him as the monster inside him. Jiraiya was ready to blow any second. This is how they treat not only a fellow shinobi, but also a child of noble birth. Gritting his teeth, he seethed to himself. If this had been Uchiha Sasuke, they would have kissed his so fast. Naruto sat against the wall by the door, his head hung low. This must be what the feeling meant. He was denied his heritage, all that belonged to him was lost. He could care less about the land or the house, those were superficial things. He wanted the memories that belonged to him that were inside, the pictures, the books, the scrolls, his family heirlooms. He wanted his parents' legacy and he was denied that. He had stopped listening after their vote came up negative. Tsunade was in a rage. How can you deny him his heritage? He is a ninja of this village and you can't deny him his parents' things. Homura pushed his glasses further up on his nose and sighed. It wasn't that he didn't like the boy, he just didn't hate him either. He was completely neutral. But the Namakazes were good people and there was no sound proof that this boy was their son. He couldn't, in good conscience, let him have something that might not belong to him. Tsunade, what you say is true. We can't deny him his heritage, but there is no proof beyond your word that he even has a heritage. There is simply no way that I can vote for him to receive the holdings of the Namikaze property, nor can any of the other council members. I don't speak for everyone, but if there were proof beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would be the first to cast my vote for I. So all you need is proof. That's all. That is all. Fine. I want 1 month. I'll have your proof or we will never speak of this again and the Namikaze estates will be auctioned off. Agreed. Heads nodded and Tsunade and Jiraiya stormed off with Naruto in tow. Retreating to the Hokage office was the only thing they could do at the moment. They should have known that those idiots wouldn't let it go smoothly. Now all they had to do was find proof. Naruto, however, had had enough of political scheming and stood up, crossed the room, and placed his hands on the shoulders of his two older companions. Enough. I see now that I will never reach the heights I want to hear. My dream has always been just that, a dream. But I've achieved a certain goal of mine. I know now who my parents were and I can live happily knowing that I was a wanted child, that my parents didn't desert me or abandon me. But Konoha no longer holds anything for me. I want to leave Tsunade. I can't do that, Naruto. You'll be labeled a missing nin as soon as you exit the gates. But what if I wasn't a missing nin? What if you reassigned me to an allied village? Tsunade sat down behind her desk and folded her hands under her chin. Jiraiya took up his station behind her. You've put some thought into this, haven't you? Ever since we saved Gaara, I've had a bad feeling that wouldn't go away, like something was going to happen that would affect me greatly. I asked Gaara if he would give me a home if I ever had to leave the Leaf and he agreed. Please, Ba-chan, don't make me stay here where I'm not appreciated. But Naruto, we appreciate you. Don't leave because of this. We'll fight it and we'll make it right. Naruto shook his head and smiled sadly. Ba-chan, I'm not stupid. I know that the council is against me. I don't have a future here except to die for a village that doesn't appreciate me. Do you know that I've never had a day go by here that I haven't been glared at, or insulted, or threatened with violence just for breathing? Do you know what I found in Suna? No. What? Acceptance. Adulation. Fellowship. I'm just one ninja, Tsunade, and I'm not the best. I'm powerful, but I know my shortcomings. I'm brash and loud and I don't think things through. Maybe in Suna I can find myself and I'll see you again one day, a better ninja and a better man. Please, Ba-chan. Tsunade swiveled her chair so that he couldn't see her face. Tears cascaded down her cheeks as she looked at Jiraiya pleadingly, as if asking him what she should do. He had no answer but a frown and a knowing nod, to which her tears seemed to redouble. It was true what Naruto said. He had no future here, he had no life. At least there, in Suna, the people didn't glare at him, they didn't hate him. And he had friends there, genuine friends who knew who and what he was. A happy thought flitted through her mind. Maybe there, he'd find love from someone who was as strong as he was, in mind and body. No one here would let their daughters near him, and his crush seemed so far away. Yes, perhaps this was for the best. She swung the chair back around and gave him a teary grin. Well then, when do you want to leave? I want to do some things first. They may have denied me my heritage, but I'm not leaving without a few things that are rightfully mine, council be damned. I want my family's scrolls, I want my family's pictures, and I want my father's coat. The rest you can do whatever you want with. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at his demands. And how do you intend to get all that, brat? I'm going back with you two one last time. I'm taking several sealing scrolls and I'm putting my family's things in them. Tsunade nodded her head, but then a fear crept into her mind. Naruto, those scrolls are important to the village. How do you intend to take them out without it being seen as treason? I'm going to make copies of whatever is written in them. We'll retrieve them and bring them here to the Hokage office, where I'll make copies and then we'll go see the council again and announce my transfer. They'll want the scrolls, you understand. Naruto set his mouth into a snarl and slammed his fist on the desk. They can't have them. Family scrolls are for family only, and if there are no Namikazes left in Konoha then the scrolls need to be destroyed. I'll burn them myself if need be. I see. If you can't have your rightful property nobody will. I like that, brat. You know they'll throw a hissy fit, right? Like I give a damn. I don't care what they think anymore. Tsunade leaned back again and opened her desk drawer, taking out a bottle of sake and 3 dishes. Jiraiya and Naruto both raised their eyebrows while she uncorked the bottle and poured the sake into the dishes. Lifting hers, she bade the two to pick theirs up. Jiraiya did so with a grin on his face, but Naruto looked apprehensive. Tsunade sighed and thrust the dish into his hand. I wanted to have a drink with you when you were older, but I may not get that chance now. You're going to drink with Jiraiya and me and you're going to like it. We need to get good and shit-faced before we go about destroying important documents tomorrow. The three lifted their dishes and clinked them together before downing them. Naruto coughed and sputtered, drawing laughter out of his two older drinking buddies and prompting them to utter at the same time. Lightweight. The next morning found our trio back at the Namikaze household, and standing in front of a heavy oaken door with a red seal on it. Tsunade and Jiraiya had thrust Naruto to the front and stood behind him while he faced the wooden gate to his desires. Looking over his shoulder, he asked for guidance on what to do. Jiraiya huffed and smacked him on the head. All those years of studying seals didn't do jack squat with you, did it? It's a blood seal, you moron. Cut your thumb and run the blood across the seal and the door should open. It'll only do this for a person of Namikaze blood though. A light bulb seemed to come on in Tsunade's head. Wait, if that's true, then that's how we can prove his heritage. They'll have to believe us then. Naruto sighed and turned around as he bit his thumb. You know as well as I do it's a futile effort, Ba-chan. They don't want me to be a Namikaze and they'll probably say something stupid like, the demon altered his blood to that of the Hokages or some shit like that. Let's just do what we came here to do and copy them at your office. Without another word, Naruto swiped his thumb across the seal and it glowed a bright red before the door swung open and a musty smell came from the now open room. Coughing slightly, the three made their way in and stared in awe at the large amount of scrolls in the vault. Minato was a lover of knowledge and his library could rival that of the Hokage Tower. Kushina undoubtedly had her own stash in here, but the majority was Minato. Naruto smiled as he looked around. His parents were definitely knowledge hogs. Deciding to forego those thoughts for the moment, he turned to his companions and tossed them some scrolls. Whatcha waiting for? Get to sealing. Several hours later, the three had gathered every scroll in that library and were headed back to copy them all. Naruto looked at Tsunade and Jiraiya and sighed. He needed to do something to thank them for their help before he left. Suddenly an idea came to his head. Hey, tell you what. As thanks for helping me do all this, I'll buy you whatever liquor you want, my treat. What do you say? If their eyes could have lit up any more, he'd have been afraid their heads would catch on fire. He was soon shoved off to the nearest liquor store with a list as long as his forearm. Perhaps offering to buy for them wasn't a good idea. The copying process went very smoothly. After sitting there copying for about an hour, Naruto had gotten bored and summoned several clones to keep going while he took a break. Tsunade soon caught on and sent several as well. She wondered in the back of her mind, if that applied to Hokage paperwork too. Jiraiya, with his one arm, had to concentrate hard to get just the right amount of energy, but was able to make 2 clones to take over his workload. The rest of the evening was spent with the three getting drunk off their asses, while Tsunade sent a message to the council to meet again in 3 days. Maybe by then, Naruto would have enough time to look over everything he wanted and get what he needed. Tsunade entered the council room with Jiraiya and Naruto following closely behind her. This would be a day to remember one way or the other. For one, she was about to send a shinobi to another village without warning, and that was considered poor taste from a cage. The second reason was that she was going to allow said shinobi to destroy documents that could prove potentially useful to Konoha and that definitely wouldn't sit well with the council. The third was that she had invited all of Naruto's friends to sit in on the proceedings, an unheard of thing in the history of Konoha. Seeing that everyone was getting restless, she started the meeting. All right everyone, thank you for coming. We are here once again to decide whether or not you will allow Naruto to take up the name Namikaze and take the seat for that clan on this council. Last time you voted nay. What say you all this time? Homura, having been named the representative after his speech last time, stood and addressed the Hokage. Have you come across any new evidence to support the claims that one Uzumaki Naruto is indeed the son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina? A collective gasp was heard from the section where his friends sat. Several murmurs were heard about how he did look like the fourth and that maybe he was somebody. Naruto grimaced when he heard that. It was as if you couldn't be somebody unless you were from a clan around Konoha. Tsunade shook her head. No, we haven't found any new evidence. Now what say you? The vote went around and it came up nay again. Tsunade sighed and hung her head. This sealed the deal. Very well. Uzumaki Naruto may never take the name Namikaze then, and the properties shall be sold off. This is the final decision of this council and may not be overturned. I shall now allow Naruto to take the floor as he has something of interest to tell you all. Naruto. He nodded his head and walked to the front of the room. Taking a rather large scroll from his back, he bit his thumb and swiped it over the length of the scroll, dumping out several more on the floor. Bending his knee, he picked up one and passed it to the council member closest to him. These are the family scrolls of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. As they are family scrolls, they cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of any untrustworthy people either in or out of Konoha. I have brought them all here to destroy them in front of the council, that they may never be used for ill. All the council members blanched at that and began to call out. Homura raised his hand, calling for silence. Whence did you come by these scrolls, boy? These were locked away in the Namikaze household, protected by several blood seals and traps. Only one who was of the Namikaze bloodline could. The old man's eyes grew large enough to bug out of his head. He lifted his gaze and locked eyes with Naruto, who had a sad look on his face. You really are. Before he could finish, Naruto had raised his hand and started speaking again. No, I am not. That was the supreme decision of this council. There are no Namikazes in Konoha anymore. Therefore, these scrolls must be destroyed and any evidence that could be used against the village must be destroyed also. I, myself, am no longer a part of this village as of tomorrow morning. I am being transferred to Suna, where I will take up station as a Suna nin, under the orders of the Godime Kazekage. I am only here to tell you of this myself. Everyone stood up and began shouting that he couldn't leave, he was the last Namikaze. It was foolish, he thought, that they would say this after a supreme decision. It couldn't be taken back. Besides, his mind had been made up. With a few quick hand signs and a cry of, Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu, he incinerated all the scrolls, amidst a chorus of howls of anger. He felt a slight pinch in his heart as he destroyed his father's work, but took solace in the fact that only the originals were lost. His parents' work would live on through him. He turned to the council member who clung to the tiny scroll and held out his hand. He scowled when the man jerked back, cradling the scroll as if it were precious. You come in here and destroy our mightiest Hokage's work and expect me to give up the last thing we may have of him. I don't care if you are his son, I won't. He never finished what he was about to say because Naruto had leapt over the table and slammed him against the wall. His fangs bared, he snatched the scroll from the man and tossed it onto the bonfire in the middle of the room. Never say I'm his son. You idiots all denied me that right and I shall never forget it. I'm going to Suna now, a place where I hope I'll be appreciated. You won't have to put up with the demon brat anymore. You won't have to put up with Uzumaki Naruto anymore. I quit. He dropped the man and walked out of the room, heading towards his apartment, where he hoped to prepare to leave in the morning. He heard the sound of footsteps behind him and turned to find his ex-teammate Sakura, and the rest of his friends. He didn't want to see them right now, but then again, no time like the present. Sakura had decided she'd speak for the group. Naruto, you can't just leave. What will we do without you? The same thing you did when Sasuke left. Carry on. Don't worry about me, I'm going to a better place. Neji took his turn. But aren't you the one who told Sasuke that he didn't need to leave the village to become strong? You're running away from your problems, Naruto. Don't you dare compare me to him. Sasuke never had to put up with the crap I did. He wasn't hated for something he had no control over. He wasn't ostracized. I'm going to a place where I'll be appreciated for what I can do, not hated for what I never did. I'm sorry, but you'll all do fine without me. You did fine when I left the first time. Hinata walked to her crush, for what she thought could be the last time. Making her way slowly forward, she wrapped her arms around his neck and sobbed against his chest. Naruto smiled and looked down at the shorter Kunoichi. She was always so kind, if only he didn't have to leave. But alas, things never go as planned. Shish, Hinata, don't worry. I'll see you again someday. Promise me that in that time you'll get stronger. She looked back up at him and gave him a shaky smile, nodding her head. She didn't trust her voice at the moment as she slunk back beside Kiba and Shino. Naruto looked at the rest and did his best to keep his voice steady. Neji, I'm sorry, but I'll have to break my promise to you. I won't be able to help you change the Hyuga. I expect you and Hinata to do it in my stead though. Lee, I'm sorry, I won't be around to spar with you anymore. 10-10, I'm sorry I never got to know you better. Shikamaru, Choji, I want you two to take care of yourselves and Ino. Don't let Asuma's sacrifice go to waste and take care of that kid of his. Shino, Kiba, take care of Hinata please. She needs your support more than ever. And Sakura, you'll have to try to find Sasuke on your own with Kakashi. I'll send whatever info I can on him, and if I see him I'll try to subdue him, but I'm not making any more promises. I'm sorry guys, but this is goodbye. He turned on his heel and left to pack, his heart breaking into pieces. He always hated saying goodbye to people, and now it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. He had people who depended on him here, but they were all strong. They'd get along without him. The group stood and watched him fade away into the evening, and one by one they began to walk off. The last to leave was Sakura. She couldn't believe that yet another of her teammates had left her all alone. She walked home sobbing to herself and thinking that if only he hadn't been denied what was rightfully his, this may have never happened. Naruto stood at the gates at sunrise, eager to begin his journey. Beside him stood Tsunade and Jiraiya, the only ones to come to see him off. Jiraiya had given him the last book of his series and made him promise to read it when he got a girlfriend. Naruto made a silent promise that if it was any good, like the old pervert said, he might buy them all. Tsunade had nearly broken down in tears and hugged him until he turned blue. She was sniffling and hiccuping the whole time, and it took Jiraiya grabbing her ass to make her let go. She turned and glared at the one-armed man, promising pain later. Looking back at the young man before her, she smiled one last time and gave him a kiss on the forehead. That was for good luck. Now, you'll let us know when you get there, right? Of course. I'll have Gaara send a messenger bird. Are you sure you don't want us to notify him beforehand? Yeah, I want this to be a surprise. Well, I better go. Naruto turned to walk away before he remembered the one thing that he had promised to do. Oh yeah, Ero Sennin. I need you to do me a favor. And what's that? I don't think I should have the Toad contract anymore. After all, it's a Konoha contract and it needs to stay in Konoha. That's not up to me, kid, that's up to Gamabunta. It's his contract. Well, we better take care of this right now then. With a quick cry of Kuchio's no jutsu, the chief Toad appeared. I don't see any danger. Why was I called here? Down here, chief. Ah, Uzumaki. What do you want? I need to cancel our contract. I'm leaving Konoha. If Gamabunta could have looked any more surprised, it would have been comical. He merely looked at the boy with hurt in his eyes and asked the inevitable question. Why? Because I'm not appreciated here. I'm leaving and I think it's dishonorable to take a Konoha contract with me. I'm sure Ero Sennin can find a suitable replacement. Gamabunta's gaze turned sad and he knocked his pipe out on the ground. There aren't many like you, kid. And you're right. I did agree to serve those who serve Konoha. No way I can convince you to stay. I'd rather you be my summoner than one who is unworthy. Sorry, Chief, I can't. I have to do this. I'm really sorry that we never had that drink either. Tell your kids I'll miss them, okay? I will. And Jiraiya, this boy's replacement better be as good as him or you're toast. Goodbye, Naruto. I'm glad to have met you. Your father would be proud. With a large puff of smoke, Gamabunta disappeared and Naruto ducked his head to keep the tears from flowing. The toads had been a part of him since he was 12 and it hurt to cancel his bind with them. Jiraiya put his arm around the boy's shoulder and gave a reassuring squeeze. Don't worry, brat. I'll make sure it ends up in the hands of someone who deserves it. I'll miss you, boy. Hi, I'll miss you too. You'll always be my favorite godparent. Jiraiya choked on a laugh and stood back, wiping the tears from his eyes. Tsunade stepped forward for the last time and wrapped him in a hug. I'll miss you, Naruto. I really will. Come visit sometime, okay? I will, Tsunade. I most definitely will. And next time, you're buying sake, okay? She laughed and stepped back beside Jiraiya, who put his arm around her shoulder for support. For once, Tsunade didn't berate him, she just leaned in and took what she could get. With a wave over his shoulder, Naruto was gone into the coming light. They watched him until he faded away, his white coat melting into the morning sun. It was like looking at the back of Minato all over again. Tsunade wiped away one last tear and looked up at Jiraiya, who looked down at her with a smile, which quickly faded as he saw her feral grin. Now then, what have I told you about grabbing my? As Naruto jogged on, he kept thinking he heard the screams of a pervert in the distance. The thought brought a smile to his face as he marched on to his new home. Hopefully, some things would never change. As Naruto trudged along the path, his thoughts went back to what he had learned earlier that week. His parents were good people, honorable people, and they had loved him. He was not happy with his father's decision to stick a demon inside him, but it was a hard thing for a man to decide to do. Do you decide that the life of your child is worth more than an entire village, or do you take the adage that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few to heart? It was a troubling question and he didn't know if he had an answer to that. His father had been in a compromising position, and if he were placed in the same, he didn't know what his solution would have been. People stared at him as he passed them by. He had forsaken his orange jumpsuit. It was a reminder of what he had left behind in Konoha, a childhood that needed to end as soon as possible. It was time for a fresh start, and he had started that with a change of clothing. Wearing beige baggy pants, a black long-sleeved shirt, black sandals, and his father's battle coat with the sleeves shredded, he was quite an imposing figure. The tall collar of the coat shielded him from prying eyes somewhat, and for that he was grateful. He wasn't out of Fire Country yet, and there were undoubtedly some people from Konoha who would recognize him. He shifted the pack on his back and straightened up slightly. It was hard for him to cancel his contract with the Toads, but he felt it needed to be done. That contract had been in Konoha for quite a while, and it just felt wrong taking it away. Even if Jiraiya never found someone to summon them again, the contract would stay in the vaults until someone was deemed worthy. He mourned the loss of his friends from the Toads, but it was for the best. He wanted a fresh start in everything. Perhaps he'd find a new contract somewhere and it would rival the Toads in power. After a couple days of walking, Naruto found himself at the border of Fire Country and River Country. He grimaced when he remembered that that was where they had found Gaara, dead on the ground with Deidara on top of him. It was not a happy memory, even if his friend was saved in the end. It was just a reminder that those bastards were still out there, even if they were weakened at the moment. He growled deep in his throat and some people walking by him turned and stared. He didn't notice and just kept walking. Thinking about Akatsuki wasn't going to help any. He needed to keep his thoughts about him, and look toward the future. He stopped about halfway through River Country for the night and made camp. He suddenly wished he hadn't been so hasty in giving up the Toad contract. Gamakichi would have made a good companion on the trip. He sighed and rested his chin on the folded arms supported by his knees. He hoped that his new life in Suna would be a happy one. At least he already had some friends there to make the transition easier. But going from an environment full of life and flora and fauna to one filled with never-ending sand and wind was quite a system shock. He stared into the fire and watched as the flames crackled and danced. He'd done so much in the past few days and it made his head spin. Deciding to try to bore himself to sleep, he summoned one of his mother's scrolls and began to read. Several hours had passed and he still wasn't asleep, but that was more from excitement than from a need of rest. This particular scroll was all about his mother's gardening ability. So that was where he got his affinity for botany. She had several tips for dealing with several different types of plants. He was intrigued with the idea of imbuing plants with chakra to make them grow and sending chakra into the ground to make grassy patches. If he saved up enough money to buy a plot of land in Suna, that would most definitely be a useful tactic. Snapping the scroll shut, he laid down and was soon asleep. Morning came earlier than he wished and he went about his morning ritual. He got out the picture of his parents and prayed that their souls were safe. He had heard over the years about the fate of his father and only hoped that Kami would have mercy on his and the other Hokage's souls. It wasn't fair that such noble men were forced to suffer while monsters such as Akatsuki roamed the earth with no repercussions. He ran his fingers over the faces of his mother and father and let a single tear fall. His dream now, besides living a full life and having a family, was to meet his parents in the next life. He stared at the faintly twinkling stars in the morning sky and wondered if perhaps two were his parents. Shrugging off those thoughts, he wolfed down his breakfast of fruits and bread, sloshing it down with water. He used a Doden jutsu to bury the remains of his fire and cleared away any evidence that he had been there. Shouldering his pack again, he continued down his path to Suna. He felt a familiar feeling the closer he got to the border and soon realized that he was close to the cave where the Akatsuki had taken Gaara. He shivered and shook himself to rid himself of the feeling. He didn't ever want to go back to that cave. He imagined the remains of Sasori were still there, what little humanity he had left rotting away with the ravages of time. Yes, he would definitely avoid that place. Soon the greens of river country began to fade and the sands began to creep in. He had looked down when he heard the first crunch of the granules under his sandals. This was his new home. When he was truly in the country, actually in the desert, he had stopped and sniffed the stifling air, trying to acclimate himself to the heat and bareness. He would definitely have to try that gardening method of his mother's. For the moment though, he didn't want to be caught in a sandstorm and Sunagakure was a few hours away. Channeling chakra to his legs, he crouched low before springing away across the desert, the sand behind him lifting in a wave before settling back down, as if he'd never been there. Gaara sat in his comfy chair, glaring at the mountains of paperwork that lay before him. He had taken the job to attain that which Uzumaki, no, his friend Naruto, had in spades. The power of caring, the power of forgiveness, the power of making a friend and protecting those he thought precious. He wanted to be someone of import, someone precious to the people, and he wanted to protect them. He stared hard at the papers and tried to incinerate them with his eyes. It was no use. This was how the people thanked him for being the cage. They gave him multitudes of paperwork and expected him to sit in an office all day. He sighed as he sat back. He probably had lost control of his sand by now, sitting in this damnable chair all the time. For some reason his thoughts swung to his one, true friend in the world. Uzumaki Naruto was, is, and always will be an enigma to him. The boy was truly too forgiving in his opinion. He smiled when he thought about their first fight. He had never seen such sadness and understanding in someone's eyes as he had then. It made him happy that he had found someone such as himself, and sad at the same time that someone else carried a burden such as his. The boy had saved his life twice now, and he was eternally in his debt. He hadn't heard from his friend in quite a while now and was wondering how he was doing. He was just about to pick up his pen and return to his paperwork when a Chunin burst through the door looking quite distressed. Gaara looked up slowly, as intimidating as possible, and gave a long, drawn-out, "Yes. Kage-sama, there is someone heading our way from the river country border. And people come from that direction all the time. It's probably a traveler. They're traveling at a very high speed. Probably just a courier ninja. Nothing to worry about. They're kicking up the sand behind them in waves, like a boat breaking across water. Perhaps I should have a look after all." Temari and Kankuro stood on the wall beside the entrance to Suna and stared out over the desert. Whoever was kicking up that much sand had to be extremely quick and powerful. They weren't normal, that's for sure. There was no mention of a messenger coming, nor was there any indication that their allies were in trouble. Their heads turned as one when they heard the swishing of sand and found their younger brother stepping out of a small whirlwind. He crossed his arms in his favorite pose and walked between them. "What's the damage?" Temari smiled at her little brother and looked back to the wave of sand getting closer. "No damage. We just don't know what or who the hell that is. It's not a courier ninja. I've never seen one who could kick the sand up like that. The only people I can think of fast enough are Rock Lee or Maida Guy, and only after they've opened the gates." Kankuro smirked and started to undo the scroll on his back. "Nah, we'd have known if it was them. You can see that godforsaken spandex from miles away. This guy's wearing a white coat with flames. He has blonde hair and he's about your height." Gaara stood and thought hard. Blonde hair, huh? There weren't many friendlies he knew of who had blonde hair unless who were male. That only left one person. His siblings watched with their eyes growing wide as that maniacal grin splayed across his face. They hadn't seen that look in quite a while. In fact, for Temari, the last time was with, "I shall go down and greet our guest. Tell no one to interfere." Before they could protest, he was gone in a whirlwind of sand. Temari looked at Kankuro and shrugged. "You'd think those two could greet each other without trying to kill one another at least." Naruto began to slow when he saw the tops of the buildings of Suna over the last sand dune. He knew he was traveling fast, and if he didn't want to slam into the walls around the city, he needed to slow down or they'd be scraping him off. He wondered if they had seen him coming when a blast of sand erupted in front of him and he instinctively threw himself to the side, rolling on top of the sand and coming to a stop on one knee. He chuckled and stood in a defensive stance. Appears Gaara couldn't wait to see him. His red-haired friend stepped out of the fountain of sand with his arms crossed and that alarming grin on his face. Naruto sighed and stood straight up. "Can't we greet each other like normal people? With a handshake or a hug? You don't have to showboat for the people of Suna. You are the Kage after all." Gaara's grin only grew wider and a playful glint came to his eyes that not many saw. "We aren't normal people, Naruto. And besides, this way's more fun than a handshake." Naruto nodded his head and took his stance back up. He was going to lose here, more than likely. After all, the desert was a part of Gaara. He had all the ammunition in the world here. Sighing, Naruto formed his favorite seal and went after his friend. Above on the wall, most of the shinobi of Suna watched as their Kage decimated his friend. Kankuro and Temari chuckled and outright laughed as Gaara flipped Naruto into the air and played with him like he was a ball. They admired the boy for not allowing his demon to come into play. If he had, the fight would have been over before it started, and even Gaara knew that. But the two were just playing, and that was evident, since Naruto managed to get in a few glancing blows. Temari heard a kunoichi beside her sigh dreamily and turned her head to the young girl. "Something wrong?" "Of course not, Temari-sama. I was just thinking that the Kage and that other guy are very handsome." Temari cocked an eyebrow and looked back out at the two flipping around. Well, the blonde was flipping around. Gaara was just standing there, although she knew he was enjoying himself. "What makes you think the blonde is handsome? I can't even really see him from here. His build. He's average height, but he has broad shoulders and an athletic build." Not too big but not too small. Besides, neon blonde is a very exotic color for hair. I wonder if it's natural. Temari didn't answer, she just turned back to what was left of the fight. Gaara currently had Naruto upside down by the ankles and was talking to him face to face. From the easily seen grins on both their faces, she could tell that they were having a pleasant conversation. Suddenly, the upside-down blonde stuck his tongue out and disappeared in a poof of smoke, and the real Naruto sprang up from the sands and put Gaara in a headlock, while giving him a noogie. Throwing her hands up to her mouth to choke back the laughter didn't help, as Kankuro and her howled while the rest of the Suna nin sat in awe at the man manhandling their cage. Gaara had changed much in his time since the Shukaku was taken from him. While in front of his people he was still the cold, emotionless bastard he was from his youth. Around friends and family he could smile a little and relax. It helps when your best friend is a hyperactive idiot hell-bent on everyone having a good time. Their roughhousing completed, the two stood and Gaara brought them over the gate on a platform of sand. Naruto felt a little uncomfortable with all the eyes on him until he remembered that no one in Suna hated him that he knew of. He was about to say hello when he found himself enveloped in a hug from Temari. Welcome back to Suna, Naruto. I hope you plan to stay for a little while. I've actually come to talk to Gaara about that. We're going to his office at the moment. Sorry, but I'll catch up with you two later. Me and the insomniac have things to discuss. Gaara muttered under his breath that he was standing right there as he and Naruto shunshined into his office. Naruto took in the unassuming room and smiled. If everything went as planned, this is where he would be receiving his orders from now on. He turned to his friend, who had taken up his station again in that comfy chair. Gaara motioned for him to sit and he let himself melt into the leather chair. So, to what do I owe this honor, Naruto? You don't make it a habit of visiting without reason. Naruto took a deep breath and looked the Kazekage in the eye. He told him the whole story behind his leaving, who his parents were, everything. At the end, he decided to drop his bomb. I want to become a Suna shinobi. A Senbon needle could have dropped and Gaara wouldn't have noticed. This was almost unheard of. A Konoha nin willingly coming to Suna was a genuine surprise. Of course, his natural curiosity was piqued. Why? The council denied me my heritage and birthright. I couldn't live there anymore, and I remember you saying that I could come here any time. I want to be a ninja under your leadership. But what of your dream? Does Tsunade know of this? Why here? Yeah, Tsunade knows. She signed my release forms. I need your approval though. I'm still a genin after all, and that rank would carry over here. I guess I'd have to take the Chunin exams again. No, you wouldn't. I'll make you a Chunin right now. But Naruto, what about your dream? Dreams die, Gaara. I have a new dream now. I have my family heirlooms and scrolls and I want to start my own family. I'll make a new clan and it will rise here in Suna. That is, if you'll let me. Of course. I'll notify Tsunade immediately. Do you need any time before you take up duties? Just a little. I have a fair sum of money saved up and I wanted to buy a plot of land if I could. I just want to relax for a bit and read through my parents' scrolls. I want to know them a little better. Well, until you're ready you may stay at my family's compound. Temari and Kankuro still live there and I don't think they'd mind you staying. I'll have to warn you not to eat Temari's cooking. She's a horrible chef. Kankuro's passable, but not by much. If you're a better cook, I suggest you offer if you don't want to starve to death. Thank you, Gaara. I promise you I'll never let you down. The two stood and shook hands before Gaara summoned Temari to escort Naruto to the Sabaku compound. As the two blondes left, he smiled and sat down while writing his letter to Tsunade. You've never let me down before, you idiot. I don't expect you to now. Now the question is, where to put a new Chunin? Temari kept cutting her eyes to the man walking beside her. She couldn't help but appreciate his looks once he was out of that jumpsuit. The coat definitely made him look familiar, like she'd seen him in a book somewhere. She couldn't put her finger on it though and it bothered her. Her analytical mind just couldn't let go of a puzzle, and Uzumaki Naruto was definitely a puzzle. So what's it like at the Sabaku compound? She nearly didn't hear him, she was so lost in her thoughts. It's alright. I have to put up with Kankuro and his puppets, but other than that it's nice. Gaara takes care of us. We never want for anything. I see. How are you and Shikamaru doing? Temari narrowed her eyes and turned to face him, making him stop. Putting her hand on her hip, she shifted her weight to one leg. There is no me and Shikamaru. He's a competent person, but he's not boyfriend material. Hell, you're more boyfriend material than he is. They walked on in silence for a few minutes, but Naruto's prankster side couldn't let something like that slide. Boyfriend material, huh? Maybe I'll take you up on that later. The rest of the way was filled with a sputtering Temari trying to regain her dignity while Naruto laughed his off. He was going to have so much fun with the Sabakus. They were way too uptight. Temari ushered him into his room and shut the door after him, after giving him a hug and welcoming him to his new home. She left with a smile on her face, muttering about blonde idiots. Naruto sighed happily and looked around his room. Home, sweet home. Gaara meanwhile was putting the finishing touches on his message. He looked it over and nodded to himself. Yes, that would do nicely. Tsunade-sama, I accept the enrollment of one Uzumaki Naruto in my ranks of Suna shinobi. I believe he will make a wonderful addition, and I thank you for giving him the option to come here peacefully. Worry not, my siblings and I shall watch out for him and make sure he doesn't get into too much trouble. I am sorry for your loss, as he is one of your best shinobi, but from what I have heard, most of Konoha will not mourn. One man's trash is another man's treasure after all. Please send all records of him via a courier as soon as possible. I thank you again, and please, do visit sometime. Naruto would like that, I'm sure. Godime cage. Sabaku no Gaara. He tied the message to a bird's leg and sent it off toward Konoha. Life was definitely going to get more interesting with Naruto here. As Temari walked down the street, back to the cage tower, she kept thinking over what Naruto had been picking on her about. She had never really had a boyfriend. All the guys in Suna were too scared of her and her brothers to ask her out. Besides Shikamaru, who was a total lazy, and Naruto, there weren't many who weren't afraid of her family. As she climbed the stairs, she thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to take him up on his offer, even if it was jokingly. She'd have to let him get settled in first, but then she'd spring her trap. As a fellow wind user, he'd be fun to train with, and she'd heard through the grapevine that he had imbued a powerful jutsu with wind manipulation. Yes, she'd definitely have to train with him. As she stood before the door to Gaara's office, she smirked as she had a brilliant stroke of genius. This teach that little asshole to make fun of her. She stepped inside and smiled at her brother, who knew immediately from that mischievous look that someone was in trouble. Brother dear, I have an idea as to what to do with our new Chunin. Naruto sat in his room alone, reading a scroll into the waning hours of the night. Gaara had stopped by earlier and said that he had sent a message and would give him a week to get settled in before he would be assigned to his new post. This gave Naruto plenty of time to read up on the history of his folks and get situated to Suna. Gaara's only request was that he eat lunch with the Sand siblings every day. That wasn't a bad condition. He liked Gaara's family. Temari could be scary, but other than that she was a cool chick. Kankuro was a prankster at heart like he was, and the two got along splendidly. He sat against the wall and read further into the scroll. His parents didn't really write much about themselves. It was mostly about their techniques, but any good ninja could garner much about a person from just that. His father was not a meticulous person, his writings flitted here and there, with attention only paid to the big things, like how to do this or that. His mother was painstakingly accurate about everything and he admired her for that. The two seemed to be polar opposites when it came to paperwork, but apparently when it came to life they had the same philosophy. Live hard, love hard. He sighed and banged his head against the wall. If only they could have lived. The next morning found Temari waking up to a wonderful smell. She didn't think about what she was wearing as she and Kankuro were the only ones in the house. She had forgotten about Naruto overnight and walked into the kitchen wearing only an oversized t-shirt and her panties. Eyes half-lidded, she yawned and stretched as she said, "Good morning," to the shape at the counter. When she didn't hear the familiar grunt of her brother, she cracked her eyes a little wider and they flew wide open when she saw who was cooking. Clad only in boxers and a muscled shirt, was Naruto, flipping pancakes on his griddle and bacon frying in another. The two stood dumbfounded, just staring at each other. Temari, admiring his well-toned body and unnatural tan, liking the way his hair hung limp without a headband and the way the whiskers on his cheek made him seem feral. Naruto stood admiring those legs of hers, well-defined and toned, and thinking that her chest must have gotten bigger since he last saw her. He cocked his head to the side, completely oblivious to the fact that he was staring and drank up her face. She was definitely cute, although she could be bossy when she wanted. They would have stood there for quite a while until a gruff voice came from behind her. "You're burning breakfast, Naruto. Pay attention. Temari, put some pants on." Temari looked down at her attire and shrieked before rushing back upstairs to get dressed. Kankuro looked at Naruto's blushing face and died laughing. It was going to be so fun teasing those two. He accepted the plate that Naruto handed him and smacked his lips appreciatively when he took his first bite. "This is really good, dude. Temari can't cook this good." "Shut up, asshole." She appeared at the door again, this time in her black battle kimono. She glared at the blonde boy, who blushed again and turned back to the stove. She smirked at his back and sat down at the table, looking longingly at Kankuro's plate. He eyed her and put an arm around it protectively. "Wait your damn turn. This grub is mine. You could share, you know. I am older than you. Not on your life. This guy's cooking from now on and I ain't giving up my portions. It's way too good. You guys are embarrassing me. Here, Temari. Sorry about earlier." She waved her hand dismissively and took a bite out of the pancake. She chewed slowly as he stood by, waiting for her reaction. She sat her fork down and turned to him. "This is without a doubt the most delicious thing I've eaten in quite a while." "Bravo, Squirt." Naruto growled at her, his elongated fangs showing. "You know, I'm not 12 anymore and I'm just as tall as you. Don't call me Squirt. I will if I want. Besides, you have a meeting with Gaara later on today. Your new assignment if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations on making Chunin, by the way." "Hey, thank you. I'm a Junin, you know. I still outrank you. HMPH, just eat your damn pancakes." Kankuro looked back up from his bacon and smirked. "Oh yes, this would be so much fun." Naruto walked up to Gaara's receptionist and smiled at her. She blushed when she saw who he was and gave him a shy smile in return. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Gaara. I hear he has something he wishes to speak to me about." "Ah yes, Uzumaki-san, go right on in. He's been expecting you for a while now." "Thank you." As soon as he had closed the door, he was pinned to the wall by a blast of sand and Gaara stood before him. "I hope you don't expect me to accept tardiness here, Naruto. I won't have you turn into that worthless sensei of yours." Naruto laughed and struggled against his bonds before Gaara let the sand recede. "I cooked breakfast this morning and had to listen to your sister give a lecture about not being a pervert." "What did you do to my sister?" "We may be friends, Naruto, but if you..." "I didn't do anything. She forgot I was there and walked into the kitchen wearing a t-shirt and panties." "Your sister is gorgeous, by the way. I can't help it, she's forgetful." "Indeed. Now sit, if you please." Once they were settled in, Gaara took up his arms crossed pose. "I sent off the message that you had arrived to Tsunade last night. I requested all your records and they should arrive soon. Now then, I have called you here because of your new assignment. One of our Chunin has been reassigned to a new post and I have need of your services in his stead. Do you accept?" "Of course, Gaara. Just tell me what I need to do." The former Jinchuriki smirked and stood grasping Naruto's hand in a firm shake. I knew I could count on you, Naruto. You will report to the academy starting next week to begin your new assignment. And that would be, why? Sensei to the new academy students, of course. Naruto's eyes went wide and he opened his mouth as if to scream, but nothing came out since Gaara clamped his hand over the boy's mouth. After several seconds of struggle, Naruto sighed in defeat and his shoulders slumped. Gaara let the sand recede and Naruto glared at him. I really hate you, you know that. What makes you think I'll be a good teacher anyway? You have the skills, you just need to apply them accordingly. Don't worry, it's not forever, just until I find someone more suitable. Here's a folder of all the information you need. I suggest you study up and get ready. Dismissed. Naruto grabbed the folder and stomped out of the office. Gaara smirked when he picked up the mumbled curses coming from his friend. The children would truly have an interesting year with their new sensei. Naruto sighed for what seemed the millionth time that night. He'd been going over the files of the students and what was expected of a Chunin teacher for a couple days now and he was not happy. The students were fine. He'd get to know them later. It was the class curriculum that bothered him. It seemed that every hidden village insisted on teaching history and other book-related topics over practical things. He scowled and leaned against the wall. He was going to change that with his class, consequences be damned. Knowing that you were responsible for teaching children how to be ninja, even if it was just the basics, was a huge burden. He wouldn't send them off half-cocked. He looked around at all the scattered files and picked up one of particular interest. It was the requirement for the graduates. Same as Konoha, Henge, Kawarimi, Bunshin. Despite their boast of quality shinobi, Suna had low starter standards like their ally. True, their numbers were lower because only the best of the academy were accepted, but his class wouldn't be like that. Pulling out a blank scroll, Naruto began to scribble furiously on the parchment. His class plan would break rules and tear down barriers, and if Gaara didn't like it, then let him try to stop him. Uzumaki Naruto always proved his detractors wrong. Naruto straightened himself out as he walked toward Gaara's office. Clad in his beige pants, black shirt, and battle coat with his Chunin vest beneath, he cast quite a shadow. He nodded his head to the receptionist and knocked on the door. He tugged on his vest again and smiled. Temari had wanted to be the one to present it to him, but Gaara reserved the right of the headband for himself alone. A monotone voice bade him to enter and Naruto stepped inside. Gaara took in his friend's appearance and nodded approvingly. While I appreciate the change of color, I don't think your father would have approved of you tearing the sleeves off his coat. Yeah, well, it gives me a better range of movement. Besides, a sleeveless trench coat looks cool. Gaara sighed and walked around his desk. He presented Naruto with his headband and bowed to him. Naruto took it with a smile and bowed to his friend. The two straightened up and each took a chair. As Gaara made his way back to his comfy leather chair, Naruto tied the headband around his arm. He liked his hair better down anyway. Congratulations, new Chunin of Suna. I am proud to welcome you into our ranks. You don't need to say all that, Gaara. Shut up, idiot. I'm obligated to. Now where was I? Oh yes. The speech continued on for nearly 5 minutes in Gaara's drawling monotone, and Naruto was sure by the time it was over that the former Jinchuriki had only said the speech to make him mad. His eye twitching madly, he tried to keep his voice calm. Is that all, Kazekage-sama? Gaara frowned and the sand behind him swirled up. I thought I told you not to call me that. I thought I asked you not to say all of that spiel. Yes, well, that is my right. On to other topics. I assume you are prepared for your class. Yes. You've read the curriculum. Read the files on your students. Yes. I can trust you not to teach them frivolous things like that Oroku no Jutsu of yours. They're children, Gaara. I wouldn't teach kids that jutsu. Not what I heard. All right then. Chunin Uzumaki, welcome officially to the Suna ranks. And Godspeed and good luck with those little brats, you're going to need it. Gee, thanks. Well, I gotta go. I'm fixing dinner again tonight and I've gotta get to the market. You're fixing dinner? MMHHMM. I'll be over later. Hey, see you then. Naruto hummed as he stood over the stove. Cooking had become something of a nerve soother for him and it relaxed him greatly. It was a plus that everyone enjoyed his cooking. He tried some of Temari's fare and ate it politely, not wanting to hurt her feelings. Kankuro, however, did not share his tact and ended up being brained by a frying pan. Poor Naruto had to run damage control between the two the rest of the evening. No wonder Gaara used to be homicidal. Naruto tensed when he felt someone lean over his shoulder, but eased up when he saw the golden tresses of Temari. Whatcha cooking? Naruto shrugged his shoulder to get her away and pushed her back with his free hand. None of your business. You'll find out when dinner's ready. Ah, but I want to know now. Well, tough shit. I'm not spoiling the surprise, but if you keep bugging me I won't make dessert either. The blonde beside him disappeared immediately. She absolutely adored the desserts Naruto had made in his short stay at the compound and had put a whole cake away by herself. She complained of an aching stomach the next day and Naruto berated her for being such a pig, earning him a knock on the head from her battle fan. Ah well, it was all in good fun. Staying with the Sand siblings was a real riot. He chuckled to himself and tasted what was in the pot. Needs more salt. An hour later Gaara showed up with Baki in tow. It was a good thing that Naruto made unusually sized portions. Between him and the Sand siblings, food never lasted long. As the four made small talk in the living room, Naruto began to set the table. Putting his fingers in his mouth, he let out a shrill whistle. All right, soup's on. The four appeared at the table so fast Naruto thought they had used Shunshin. With a quick, "Itadakimasu," everyone dove in. Naruto waited to see what they thought before he dug into his plate. Baki sat up straight and swallowed his mouthful before smiling at Naruto. This is very good Uzumaki. Much better than anything these three ever came up with. Shouts of indignation came from Kankuro and Temari while Gaara just grunted and kept eating. No use arguing if the food got cold. Once everyone was done and patting their bellies, Naruto retreated to the kitchen and came back with a covered dish. Temari was literally bouncing in her seat from anticipation. Naruto pulled the cover off the dish to reveal a double chocolate cake. Temari was practically foaming at the mouth. Gaara looked over at her and sighed. Temari, close your mouth. You're drooling everywhere. Naruto just laughed as the kunoichi wiped her mouth off and held out her plate for a slice of cake. He cut her a generous portion and watched her dive into it. The others were no better though, except for Baki who kept some dignity while trying to shovel it in as fast as he could. Gaara, you're the case cage. You shouldn't eat like a pig. It sets a bad example for those of low station like myself. I'll remember that when you have to come up with extra curriculum for the children. Perhaps table manners would be a good subject. Perhaps. Dinner passed without much more incident and the five found themselves in the living room, passing around a sake bottle. Baki took a strong swig and passed it to Gaara, who declined and passed it to Kankuro. Baki stared at Naruto for a moment before speaking. So Uzumaki, any idea how you're going to teach all those brats? I do actually, but I'm not going to tell what my lesson plan is. I want my class to be unprepared for what I have in store for them. They'll find out in 2 days what kind of teacher I am. Temari took a swig and passed it to Naruto. So you won't tell us anything? Not even a little hint. Naruto smirked and took a swig before passing the bottle to Baki again. I'll just say that my curriculum will be as unorthodox as I am. We need ninja here in Suna, but more importantly we need quality ninja. I intend for my entire class to pass. Gaara stared at him incredulously before snorting. I've heard that claim before Naruto and believe me, that's a dead wish. It won't happen. I know what the requirements for Genin are Gaara. I intend for my class to surpass those standards. That's all. The other four stared at him for a second before going back to their drinks. Baki took a huge swig and sighed heavily. That'll be the day. Today was doomsday. Naruto groaned when the alarm clock went off and took a swipe at it, sending it across the room and into a wall. He sat up and looked bleary-eyed across the room before settling on the scrolls still spread out on his bed. He rubbed his eyes furiously and mussed his hair. Growling, he got out of the bed and set the alarm clock back on the bedside table. With a sigh, he got dressed in his now normal attire before going downstairs to start breakfast. Temari would be up soon and Kankuro would follow. Naruto was lost in thought as he flipped the omelet. He was no genius and he'd accepted this role without any prior knowledge of what to do. Flying by the seat of his pants worked in battle, but in a classroom structure was the watchword. He'd have to hope that what he was going to do wouldn't be frowned upon. He didn't like the idea of parents or an angry Gaara trying to kill him. Temari came in and said, "Good morning." Naruto waved at her and set her omelet on the table, before turning back to fix another for Kankuro. If bad things happened, then bad things happened. Naruto would make no excuses for what he was about to do to those children. He'd seen too much in his short life. He was 16 years old and was going to teach children just a few years younger than he. They couldn't understand what he had experienced in life, the solitude, the loneliness, the pain, the sadness. But he'd make them understand. Those kids would leave his classroom, not as he had left his, a stupid, simpering little fool. They'd all leave shinobi of the highest caliber or none of them would graduate at all. Kankuro stumbled in and grunted. Naruto sat his plate in front of him and began his own omelet, still lost in thought. Temari had watched the boy from the moment she entered the kitchen. He never looked at them, just kept making breakfast as if in a trance. She knew today was his first day as a teacher, but she'd never seen the hyperactive blonde so quiet. It was almost scary. But she knew enough from dealing with Gaara not to bother someone when they were being introspective. It wasn't good for anybody. She wanted to say something bad, but when the blonde dropped his plate on the table and ate absent-mindedly, she knew it wasn't her place. Kankuro glanced across the table to his sister and nodded his head in Naruto's direction. She shook her head no. She wasn't going to interfere. Kankuro sighed and sat up straight. "Oi Naruto, what the hell's with the long face?" The blonde looked up and gave the puppet master a confused look. "What's the deal, man? You nervous?" "Who wouldn't be? I don't know what I'm getting myself into. Hell, I don't even know if I'm good with kids." Temari pushed her plate away and looked into his eyes. "You'll do fine, Naruto. I know you can do it." For some reason that settled him down some. He felt more at ease. He gave her a shaky smile and returned to his meal with more gusto. The siblings looked at each other and grinned. He'd be fine. Naruto strode down the hallway of the school with his files ready. He looked this way and that, trying to find his room, and saw someone leaning against the wall further down. Upon getting closer, he saw it was Gaara, leaning outside his class door. The redhead looked at him and nodded. "Good luck, my friend. Don't let me down. I expect big things from this class." "Why? Because I'm so awesome?" "No, because you're an idiot who has the devil's luck. I expect you at my office for lunch. Goodbye." Gaara was gone in a swirl of sand and Naruto took a deep breath before entering the room. His descent into hell had begun. The children were all hyped up today. They were getting a new sensei. Some had heard that he was a badass Junin who had been hurt and was on sick leave. Others had heard that he was a missing nin from another country that Kazekage-sama had convinced to become a Suna nin. Others had heard that it was a beautiful kunoichi who was as deadly as she was good-looking. None of them were even close. They all looked up when they heard the door latch turn. The room grew quiet as the door opened, revealing a teenager clad in beige pants, a long-sleeved black shirt with a Chunin vest over it and a sleeveless white trench coat with red flames around the bottom. The boys all stared in awe at how young he was. The girls blushed at his looks. The blonde hair was a rarity in Suna, only Temari-sama had blonde hair and it wasn't that blonde. It seemed to fall about his head in a haphazard way and yet framed his face perfectly. Everyone wondered why he had scars on his cheeks and just who he was. They'd never seen him in the village before. They watched as he crossed the classroom and stopped in front of the desk, dropping the files on top before turning and hopping up to sit on top of the desk with his legs crossed and his hands on his knees. He grinned at them, and when they saw his enlarged fangs, their eyes opened wide. He looked like a fox. The slanted eyes only made that more prominent, although foxes don't have blue eyes. Hello class, I'm Uzumaki Naruto, your new sensei. You may address me as Naruto sensei, okay? All the children nodded and bade him good morning. Naruto smiled at them before hopping off the desk and standing straight as an arrow, his hands behind his back. Now that the pleasantries are out of the way, let me tell you a little about myself. I am the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi no Yoko. I have a fox demon inside of me, just like Kazekage-sama had inside of him. Before any of you freak out, I have the situation under control. I just want you to know that, so that if any of you are going to make this a problem, leave now. He paused to see if any would leave. None did. That was a good sign. Good. We might work out all right after all. Tell me, what are the requirements to be a genin of Suna? A small girl raised her hand. Naruto nodded for her to speak. To do the henge, kawarimi, and bunshin, and to also pass a written test. Naruto nodded and the girl sat down pleased with herself. That is correct. That is Suna's graduation exam. But it is not mine. The kid's eyes flew wide open and their ears perked. I don't merely mean to make you genin. I plan to make you ninja. Fully functioning ninja by the time you leave this classroom. You, in the front row, what is in that textbook? History, sir, along with theories on the lower level jutsu. Give me that. The student walked forward and handed Naruto his book. He flipped through it, made a disgusted face, and tossed it on the floor. Everyone, take your textbook and toss it into a pile. Once everyone had complied, he made some seals and burned them with a kaiden jutsu. The children all stared in horror. What the hell was this man thinking? If you want to study that, do it on your own time. I plan to make you children strong, stronger than the genin in Konoha, stronger than Iowa, stronger than any other genin in this school. When you leave my classroom, you will be able to stomp the shit out of any student from this academy outside this classroom. Fighting amongst yourselves will not be tolerated. Am I clear? If you have an ego, if you're a fangirl or fanboy, if you're just an idiot with a chip on his shoulder, get out. I have no use for you. I was an idiot when I was a genin. I thought I had something to prove. I left the academy greener than a grasshopper's ass and thought I was king of the world. Let me tell you kids something. The world isn't fair. I'm the first to admit this. I'm a human sacrifice, kids. I've been beaten, I've been tortured, and I've nearly been killed. The ninja world is not pretty and some of you may die. I'm not trying to scare you, but that's the way the world is. Don't think being a ninja is cool, don't think it is noble. It's a job. It's a service to your village. To most you are a tool. Personally, I don't believe that. Emotion can't be wiped out. It's what makes us human. I want you to know that I don't play favorites. I will be working with each and every one of you personally. This class is a team effort. If you have illusions of grandeur, if you think you're better than your classmates, get out. This is the golden rule of my class. Everyone passes or nobody passes. And we will do this over and over and over again, until everyone passes. Am I clear? Every head nodded dumbly. Naruto smiled and his smile made the children relax more. I've seen favoritism and what it can do to a team. I won't let that happen to my students. If one of your classmates is struggling, help them. It's better for you in the end. If you can't get your chakra under control, ask someone who's good with control to help you. If you need to build up your reserves, then get with someone who knows ninjutsu. If you suck at hand-to-hand combat, find a classmate who can kick your and work with them. That works the other way around too. Offer to help. Don't sit by idly while someone struggles. If I see you doing that, I'll kick you out of this class so fast, even medical jutsu won't be able to take the boot print off your cheeks. The children all laughed at that and Naruto's smile grew wider. Not to say there won't be bookwork or homework assignments. I just prefer to work on the practical things. History, to me, is a hobby. Knowing how many hairs were on the Shodime Cage's ass isn't going to help you mid-battle. Knowing how to beat the shit out of your opponent will. Now I'll take questions until we have to leave. Don't tell me your name though. I don't want to know them. Why not, sensei? Because then that would mean that I had a personal attachment to you, and as a sensei who is going to grind you into the ground, I'd rather not know you all personally, otherwise I might decide to go easy on you. Are you going to teach us lots of cool jutsu? I have a very limited repertoire at the moment, but I will teach you what I can. Remember kids, a ninja never stops learning. He's always learning something new, something useful. What jutsu I do know are powerful though. At one time, I had the Toad contract, but I gave it up when I left my village. What village are you from originally? I'm from Konoha. I left there for personal reasons that I won't divulge to you kids. What's the biggest toad you ever summoned? The chief toad Gamabunta. The children all gasped and began to whisper amongst themselves. Naruto cocked his head and asked what the problem was. Nothing, sensei. It's just that Kage-sama was beaten by a boy who could summon toads during the failed invasion of Konoha. We've heard that he's friends with him now though. Naruto put on his foxiest grin and put his hands on his hips. Yeah, I whipped Gaara's ass pretty good. If the children were dumbstruck before, then they were comatose now. No way. That was you. You beat the Kage. When we were children, yes. But I don't want to talk about that now. Why not? It's not my place to tell of the defeat of the Kage. He's my friend and I won't belittle him by talking about things in the past that don't affect us now. Naruto looked around the room and saw that their questions were coming to a close. Any more questions? Just one. Can you show us your jutsus? Naruto grinned and walked to the door. He turned in the doorway. Let's take a trip outside real quick. Some of mine can be a bit destructive. The kids filed outside quickly and blinked against the nearly noonday sun. Naruto coughed to get their attention. I'll show you two of my favorites and after that we'll go home for the day. Putting his fingers into a familiar cross-shaped seal, he cried out, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, and as many clones as there were students popped up. Naruto looked to his students and grinned. This is how I'll be teaching each of you personally. I prefer hands-on training and teaching so no one will fall behind. But sensei, they're just Bunshin. They can't help us. One of the clones frowned and walked over to the boy. Everyone watched as it raised its hand and waited for it to pass through the boy's head. Instead, a smacking sound was heard and everyone looked in shock to see the boy holding his head. The clone walked back beside its brethren and smirked. As you can see, these are Kage Bunshin, not regular Bunshin. They are quite solid and have my knowledge and ability. When they are dispelled, I learn everything they learned and I keep the knowledge. They're extremely useful, and if I deem that everyone is worth passing and has enough chakra capacity, I shall teach it to you as a parting gift. The children seemed to be salivating at the chance to learn such a powerful jutsu. Sensei, what about the second jutsu? Ah yes, my other favorite. This is difficult to learn and I will not teach any of you this. It takes an insane amount of control and power and you simply aren't ready. Even I can't do it without the aid of a clone. He held out his right hand and a clone stepped forward. Slowly blue chakra began to form in his hand and took the shape of a sphere as the clone maintained it. Naruto ran toward a large piece of an old wall and thrust the sphere into it, blowing it to smithereens. He clapped his hands to free them of dust and walked back to the group, dismissing his clones. He turned back to the kids and ushered them back inside, ignoring the heads poking out of the windows to see what the hell was going on. Once inside the classroom, he took up his station at the desk again. Now look kids, I'm not going to lie to you. This is my first time as a teacher and I don't want to screw up. I promised Gaara that I wouldn't let him down and I intend to start with this class. Suna needs good shinobi, dependable shinobi, and this class has the potential to be one of the best ever. Take the rest of the day off and think about whether you want me as a sensei or not. I'm unorthodox, I'm brash, but if you're willing to learn, I'm willing to help you. If you, D rather wait till next year when you can have a seasoned Chunin teacher, then I won't blame you. We'll be going by ear here. We'll still have tests by the way, but that will be on things I think are important. Personally I think genin exams are a crock. I myself can't create a simple bunshin. I have too much chakra. I have a friend back home who can't use jutsus but he's still one of the best ninja I've ever met and on a good day he could kick anyone's from here to mist and back and never have that smile of his leave his face. We will accentuate your positives and work on your negatives. Remember this class, motto is, no one is left behind. Now get out of here. I got other things to do and a lesson plan to work on. The children filed out as if in a daze and Naruto left after them, wondering if he was doing the right thing. As soon as the door was closed, a genjutsu dropped and the Sand siblings stood in the corner. Temari turned to Gaara and saw that he was deep in thought. So, what do you two think? Kankuro took up a thinking pose that looked unnatural on him, but this was an unorthodox thing to begin with. I think he'll either make or break these kids. Naruto was always a do-or-die kind of person. Personally, I think the academy has been due for a shake-up like this for years. What do you think, Temari? I think he'll do fine. I actually like his approach. It reminds me of Baki-sensei. Gaara, what do you think? Gaara didn't answer for several minutes. He just stood there with his arms crossed until that small smile made it onto his face and his siblings stared at him waiting for his answer. I hope Naruto bakes another dessert tonight. I seem to have acquired a sweet tooth. He disappeared in a swirl of sand, leaving two baffled Junin. After the shock wore off, Temari smiled at Kankuro as they walked out of the room. He'll do just fine. And I hope he bakes a cake tonight too. That boy's a damn good cook. Kankuro took a sip out of his canteen. Then why don't you rope him and take him out? Temari looked up as they walked and waited until Kankuro took another sip of water before answering. I just might. I saw him in boxers, remember? He has a great ass. Poor Kankuro nearly died from choking. Naruto did indeed bake a cake that night and everyone was very appreciative. He retired early to his room to think about what he'd done that day. He laid on the bed with one arm on his forehead, staring at the ceiling. Had he done the right thing in telling those kids the truth? Had he been too harsh in telling them the ugliness of the world? He sighed and rolled over to look at the clock. It was late and he needed to get to sleep. He rolled back onto his back and sighed again. I guess I'll find out in the morning. Walking to class was somewhat of a chore for Naruto. It seems that people had heard of his speech to his students and the results were mixed. Most of the ones who he assumed were parents, or people who were the age of the parents of his students, gave him dirty looks. The older folks and ranked ninja gave him appreciative looks. Apparently, being spontaneous and brash was a double-edged sword when it came to teaching. At least they didn't outright hate him. Walking peacefully was another new experience to him. In fact, most greeted him or gave him a polite nod. Having the cage as a friend was a good benefit apparently. He thought back to the night before and Temari. She had smiled at him more than she usually did and had destroyed his dessert with passion, even growling at Gaara when he tried to take the last piece. Naruto smiled in spite of himself. It wasn't every day you saw Gaara startled like that. He stepped into the school and greeted everyone he met with a smile. One of his fellow teachers walked up to him and stuck out her hand. Hello there. I'm Urameshi Kari. My class is the one down from yours. I have to say, your little demonstration yesterday was quite a shocker. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Urameshi-san? Kari, please, and that's a good thing. It's nice to have a teacher that the students actually look up to and don't disrespect. Look up to? Hey, if they look up to me, they don't know me yet. My students will hate me by the time I'm through with them. Why's that? Because of the regimen I'm going to put them through. I'm sorry to cut our conversation short, Kari-san, but I have to get to class and so do you. I look forward to speaking with you again. Kari watched as he paced on down the hall, the heels of his shoes thumping against the wooden floor. Interesting guy. Naruto walked into his classroom and took up his position at the desk again. He was pleasantly surprised to see that all his students had shown back up. They were indeed a surprising bunch. He'd expected at least 4 or 5 to not come back. He smiled at them and walked to the blackboard. "Good morning, class." In unison, they all chanted, "Good morning, Naruto-sensei." His smile grew a little wider. Naruto-sensei. Yeah, he liked the sound of that. He faced them again and put his hands behind his back. "Now do you all remember what I spoke of yesterday?" "Good, good. Today will be our first official day of training. I will be with all of you and will do an assessment of your skills. But first, let's all go outside. Follow me." Opening the door, he turned to see them still in their seats and raised an eyebrow in annoyance. "Move your lazy asses and get outside." They all squeaked and flew past him. Chuckling to himself, he followed them out and found them in a line, facing the building. "Ah, excellent form. I'm glad that you all know how to stand at attention. Now, to begin, you're all going to do 5 laps around Suna. Once you're done, we'll begin with a few light calisthenics and then you'll sit as I lecture on a topic. Once I'm finished, and it'll be brief since I hate to sit still, we'll begin working with each of you individually. This will be our regimen for the mornings. Now let's go. Follow me." He heard little to no grumbling as he jogged away. That was good. It seemed that these kids took him seriously. He smirked as he led them on their run around the village, which he was sure would wear them all out. What they didn't know was that their training had already begun. This was to build their endurance. The light calisthenics when they got back were to stretch their bodies out before they got into the heavy stuff. The lecture was because he hated to read textbooks. If his former senseis had only used the approach he was going to use, he wouldn't have been half as pathetic as he had been. After about 2 hours, their run was through. Many students looked about ready to collapse, but Naruto was proud to see a gleam in their eyes, a look that was filled with determination. He led them through some jumping jacks and stretches and then had them sit in a semicircle around him as he began that morning's lecture. "Now I'm sure most of you are tired and you rightfully should be. Just remember that all of you are 8 years old and are a beginning class. The fact that none of you dropped out of our run speaks wonders about you. I'm proud of all of you. As we go on in the years to come, it will grow easier and we will set new goals to supersede those we have surpassed. I want you to listen carefully as I explain something to you." Despite their tiredness, he was pleased to see them all lean eagerly in for his lesson. "Do all of you remember what I told you about shinobi being emotionless tools yesterday?" "Good. You all remember. I don't believe that, not one bit. Emotions can help you in a fight as much as hinder you. It's simply a matter of knowing when to use them. Anger can blind you, but it can also help you gain strength to win. Sadness can burden you, but it can also drive you to succeed. Do not forsake your emotions, for that is folly. I, myself, am a very emotional person. I seem to be driven by them. But I use them to my advantage. Tell me, class, what makes a person strong?" The answers ranged from ninjutsu to muscles, and Naruto sighed in annoyance. That is a typical answer. It's true that those things can make you stronger. But they will never allow you to break the glass ceiling and become a great ninja like emotions can. The truth to gaining strength, the real truth, is that to become strong you must protect your precious people. When they are in danger, you can overcome any obstacle to save them. I was told this by a very wise person, who died before their time. I took his words to heart and hold them closely to this day. Naruto-sensei, who was this person? Naruto smiled sadly and looked toward the scorching sun. He was my first friend, someone who I could identify with. His name was Haku and he was the apprentice of, the demon of the bloody mist, Momochi Zabuza. Haku was a kind, gentle soul and loved his master greatly. He would have done anything to help him achieve his dream, and that is what made him strong. But even great ninja fall prey to emotion, and in the end, even though we were enemies, he couldn't kill me. His heart was too soft, too kind. And yet, he got strong because of Zabuza. Haku was a child thrown away. He came from mist, where bloodlines were despised and anyone who had one was killed. His mother was from a clan whose line allowed them to manipulate ice. His father killed his mother and then tried to kill him, but Haku slaughtered his father in a moment of panic. He wasn't wanted. Then Zabuza found him, and wanted him for the very thing that everyone else hated him for. Zabuza was not a good man, but he took in an urchin and nurtured him, fed him, clothed him, gave him a purpose. He was precious to Haku, even if it was only for those reasons. With him Haku felt wanted. That's not to say Zabuza loved him. Haku was a tool to him, that's what he told Haku and himself. But deep inside, Haku was the son he never had and it pained him to see Haku die. The day Haku died, snow fell in a land that had never seen snow and Zabuza died, wishing with all his heart to see the boy in the next life. I hope he made it there. I hope those two are together and I hope they are happy. Purity. That's what Haku was, pure as the snow, and with the snow came a pure start for a country on the brink of decline. Naruto looked at his students and sniffed. I hope you all take Haku's words to heart. Shinobi are not gods, we are men and women, flesh and blood, and we take life and we give life. We love and we hate, we kill and we protect. But never forget that to become strong, you must protect those precious to you. If you aren't strong enough to defeat someone, then it's because you haven't found someone precious enough to you yet. When you go home today, I want you to think about who is precious to you. Tell those people you love them every day, because as a ninja, you never know when your last day will be. Think of those you will leave behind and honor them every day. I'm an orphan. I had no one until I was nearly 12 years old. But here, in Suna, I hope to forge a loving relationship with someone. I want to find precious people here. I have 3 already, but I want more. Love is meant to be spread, hatred is meant to be contained. Never take your life for granted. This is the lesson for today. Think about your goals as a ninja, and before that goal, make this your golden rule. Protect those precious to you. If you do that, you will never fail, no matter what you do. And you will all be splendid shinobi. Naruto looked out over his students and saw that they were all deep in thought. He couldn't believe how good teaching felt. It made his heart swell to know that he was molding these children, that his teachings would guide them in life. Clapping his hands to get their attention, he summoned enough clones so that each child had one. Today we will work and see where your chakra control is. Once that is found, we will begin exercises to build up your reserves. We'll work on taijutsu tomorrow. I'm not the best at genjutsu, but I'll find a genjutsu specialist and we'll have them help us. Now then, let's split up. The children all picked a clone and spread out. Some were passable with chakra control, while others were abysmal. A couple actually had rather decent control, but he chalked that up to small reserves. Once it was found where their control level was, Naruto called them all back. The kids stood in a line, awaiting further orders. You'll be happy to know we're going back inside for this. We don't have the necessary area to work out here. Now follow me back inside. Once back inside, Naruto turned to the children. Now we're going to work on your control. You're going to climb these walls, with no hands. Many children looked at him like he was stupid and a couple scoffed. Naruto threw his head back and laughed. Don't worry, that was my reaction to this as well. I started on trees, but unfortunately, we don't have that luxury, at least not yet. Perhaps I can do something about that in the future. For now, watch me. The students watched in awe as he walked up the wall and then across the ceiling, standing above them, looking down. This will both help build your chakra reserves and build your control. Now then, to avoid any holes in the wall, I want you all to lay on the floor and put your feet on the wall. There won't be any running starts, so you'll have to concentrate. Focus the chakra to the bottom of your feet and place your foot on the wall. When you think you have it, gently place your foot on the wall and see what happens. If you feel it begin to stick, and you will feel it, then put more weight on that foot and concentrate on the other while maintaining that level of chakra output. Try to match it in the foot not stuck to the wall and continue onward. The object is to get at least halfway up the wall today. If you can't, don't worry. I'll help you. The children all lay down, and as expected, those with small reserves made it up within several minutes. They could not, however, maintain it for long before flipping to the floor and lying down again. The ones with bad control struggled. They would put a foot on the wall and test, but couldn't seem to get the right level. The clones stood over them, encouraging and giving instructions. As lunchtime rolled around, every student was able to at least get off the floor. They looked discouraged, but as the clones poofed away, Naruto eased their fears. Don't worry about getting it on the first day. I didn't learn this until after I was a genin. It's not something that most people learn until later. I want you guys prepared though. Go to lunch, and after you come back, we'll start on another lesson. Be back in an hour. Naruto walked into Gaara's office just a few minutes past noon and saw that the redhead had a table against the wall laden with fruits and meats. Drooling from the mouth, he headed towards the table only to have a wall of sand appear in front of him. It's rude not to announce that you're here before diving in. Fine. I'm here. Can I please eat now? I'm starving. Look at me. I'm wasting away. I highly doubt that. Bring me a plate over here when you come. I need to finish reading this document. Naruto piled the plates with as much meat and fruit as he could carry and made his way to Gaara's desk. He swept some documents out of the way and sat Gaara's plate down in front of him, receiving a grunt of appreciation. Or at least he thought it was appreciation. Munching happily on his meal, he waited for Gaara to finish before striking up a conversation. Grumbling under his breath, Gaara signed the paper with a flourish and put it in his outbox. He grabbed a slice of cantaloupe and sighed contentedly. So, how go things at the school? It's all right. The kids are uncommonly sedate and willing to learn. I don't understand it. Perhaps it was your little speech you gave them. You heard about that. Gaara nodded and reached for a slice of ham. From numerous sources, I'd say you scared the stupidity right out of them. That's a good thing though, so don't go getting mopey. It doesn't suit you. Well, I just hope I'm doing the right thing. Have any parents complained about me yet? 1. He's a grandfather and legal guardian of one of your students. He remembers me way back when I was still a bloodthirsty killer and doesn't like people like you or I. He's stuck in the past and wanted to pull his grandchild out. Of course, I told him where he could go if he didn't like it. He caved with little difficulty. You used your sand on him, didn't you? People should not be so foolish as to believe that just because I am young, that I am a pushover as case cage. I don't take being told what to do very kindly, no matter if they are my elder or not. You still shouldn't threaten people, Gaara. It'll only reinforce his opinion of us. Gaara sighed and looked at his friend as he munched on some grapes. You're too kind for your own good, Naruto. It'll be the death of you someday. Perhaps. I'm sorry, Gaara, but I have to return to class. My clone says that the students returned earlier than I thought. Very well. I shall see you this evening perhaps, if my duties don't keep me here all night. All right. Later. As Naruto walked back to the classroom, he wondered what he could show these kids. He decided that starting with the basics was the best thing to do. Since he'd already made them do control exercises today, they should be able to do henge with no problem. Nodding to himself that that was indeed the correct path to follow, he walked inside to find his classroom in utter chaos. The children were talking and laughing amongst themselves loudly. He gritted his teeth. The clone had dismissed itself prematurely. Next time he'd leave 2 clones to avoid this. The kids never noticed as he smoothly glided to the desk and leaned against it, his arms folded against his chest. The more he listened to the pointless banter, the more irritated he became. He thought of using his former sensei's big head jutsu but decided to test the theory that Gaara had that these children actually respected him. As quietly as he could, he uttered 2 words. Be still. As if those were magic words, all the kids turned in their desks and faced forward. It was amazing, the power he held over these children. Only Konohamaru had listened to him with such rapture and attention. He coughed into his hand and looked over all of them. We'll begin with our last lesson of the day. You will all learn to perform henge. I will situate you each with a clone and it will show you the necessary seals to perform this jutsu. This is a rudimentary jutsu, as are all the academy graduating standards. However, henge and kawarimi can save your life if need be. They cost relatively little chakra and higher level shinobi still use these E-class jutsu to this day. In fact, henge was my favorite technique for quite a while. Allow me to give you a demonstration. Naruto put his hands in the proper seal and transformed into Gaara. In the Kage's monotone drawl, he explained the exercise. To complete the jutsu, to make it totally effective, it helps if you learn the mannerisms and voice of your preferred target for transformation. If you can replicate everything down to the tiniest twitch of a finger, only a genjutsu master or someone with a dojutsu could tell you weren't the real article. Now then, scatter out around the classroom and prepare to learn. The children were all assigned a clone and began to perform the necessary seals while Naruto sat at his desk and wrote some things down. These kids would become the model for what an academy student should be. He'd make sure of that. After nearly a half hour, one of his clones poofed out, signifying that a student had completed the jutsu. Naruto glanced up to the girl and motioned for her to come before his desk. So you've completed the exercise. Hi sensei. Indeed. Perform the henge for me. Transform into me. The girl made the necessary seals and turned into a perfect copy of Naruto. He nodded and stood up, making his way around the desk. A few more examples and I'll assign you a new task. I want you to transform into what I do. The girl nodded her head and Naruto transformed into Gaara and she followed suit. He turned into Baki and she did that as well. He poofed into Temari and the girl did it mostly well but the hair was slightly discolored. Naruto undid the illusion and sat back down in his chair. You have a high degree of control but that is mostly due to low reserves. You performed very well, but when you turned into Temari, you discolored her hair, signifying your chakra was nearly out. Do not perform any more jutsu for the rest of class and let your reserves fill back up. Help out the other students and learn from their mistakes. Watch what they do and give suggestions. Dismissed. The girl bowed and walked over to a boy who seemed to be struggling. Naruto's clone stepped back and watched the two. The boy seemed grateful for the extra help and soon was able to perform the just you with minimal difficulty. Naruto smiled at his students and continued with his paperwork. Soon, the day was over and Naruto called for the students to return to their seats. Many flopped down, breathing heavily while his clones dispelled. He walked around in front of the desk and leaned against it. Very good. You all did well today. I want you to go home and do as you please this evening with one exception. I want you to try to trick a family member by using the henge. If you can't perform the henge all that well, then practice with your control. Now then, get out of here. I have better things to do than stare at your ugly mugs. The students beamed at the praise and gave him a "Hi sensei" before leaving. Naruto shuffled his papers and made as if to leave when he saw the woman from that morning standing in the doorway, leaning against the jamb. He waved to her and said hello. You're quite the unorthodox one, aren't you, Naruto-san? I was walking by and saw the students all laid on the floor with a copy of you standing over them. Tell me, what were you doing? That's a trade secret. How is your class? My class is fine. They're coming along quite nicely, although they hate my lectures. They say history is boring. I agree. I gave my class a lecture on emotions and shinobi today. They actually seemed interested in what I had to say. It's quite an experience molding minds. Indeed. Well, I suppose I've kept you long enough. I shall see you tomorrow, I suppose. Good evening, Naruto-san. Goodbye, Kari-san. After another spectacular dinner, Naruto sat on the roof of the compound, staring out over the desert. He was lost in thought again, a strange occurrence considering who he was. He had been reading one of his father's scrolls on jutsus and was eager to try them, but between the academy and cooking for his housemates, he didn't have any time left. He sighed and looked up into the stars. He supposed even the stars could feel lost sometimes. He heard the crunch of a shoe behind him and didn't bother to turn around. Her scent carried on the wind. Hey Temari. Need something? She settled down beside him and pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. No, I don't need anything. I just wanted to see if you wanted some company. You've been unusually quiet lately. I've had a lot to think about lately. That's true. I don't think I've asked you yet how you like it here. I like it very much. It's less green than Konoha, but the people are nicer to me. Besides, if I can make it work, it'll be a lot greener around here someday. She looked at him like he had two heads. What does that mean? He gave her a foxy grin that showed his fangs. That's a secret. You'll be the first to find out though if it works, I promise. HMPH, everything's a secret with you. I heard about your teaching regimen today. Word gets out fast, huh? With those gossipy little brats of yours it does. They're all so excited to have a sensei that's not afraid to tell them the truth. Word around the campfire is that you have quite a few pairs of eyes on you, both professionally and otherwise. Naruto cocked an eyebrow and looked at her quizzically. What's that mean? She smirked at him and looked at the stars. That's a secret. Look who's being a hypocrite. You get onto me for being secretive and yet here you are keeping secrets. Sounds like a double standard to me. Well, you know the exchange for secrets. I'll tell mine if you tell yours. Nah, I can live without your secret. Besides, we'll both find out eventually what the other meant. Asshole. Ah, you love it. The two sat in relative silence for what seemed like forever. Both marveling at how at ease they were around the other. Comfortable silence. Didn't someone say something about that sometime or other? Soon enough Temari sighed and rested her chin on her arms. I have to go to Konoha tomorrow to give them our reports and get theirs. Anything you'd like me to tell the old lady? Just that I'm doing all right and that I miss her. If you see a one-armed pervert, tell him I miss him too. Temari laughed softly and turned her attention back to the desert. It looked so different at night, not at all the scalding, tortuous wasteland it was during the day. She looked over at her companion and took in his facial features. He'd grown since she last saw him again. He was taller and that baby fat was disappearing rapidly. He'd gotten more handsome. Stronger too. Suddenly Kankuro's suggestion didn't sound so crazy. It might be fun to have a guy like Naruto as a boyfriend. He'd be a challenge to her, unafraid to bear her judgment and punishment. Hell, she'd bashed him over the head numerous times in the past days he'd stayed at the compound and he just brushed them off and kept picking with her. With that thought in mind, Temari made a decision. She was the daughter of a former Kazekage, the sister of the current Kazekage, and one of the most powerful Junin in the military. Having a boy who wasn't afraid of her and was stronger than her as a boyfriend was a damn good idea. It was just a bonus that he was good looking and smarter than he let on. She jumped to her feet, the sudden motion startling Naruto. When he asked her what was wrong, she merely smiled down at him and held out her hand. He took it and she lifted him up. Say Naruto, you ever had a girlfriend? Taken aback by the abrupt question, he managed to stammer out a no. How about dates? Ever been on a date? Another no. Wanna go on one with me? If the boy was stuttering earlier, he was speechless now. A beautiful, deadly kunoichi asking him on a date. What alternate dimension had he stumbled into? Temari took his silence as hesitation and growled, grabbing him by the shirt collar. Look Naruto, I'm the daughter of a Kazekage and the sister of the current one. I'm used to getting what I want and you're no exception. Now I want you to take me on a date and you're going to like it. This little proclamation snapped Naruto out of his muddled thoughts and brought back some of that bravado he was famous for. He narrowed his eyes and spoke in a haughty voice. And since when have I cared who someone was related to or what their name was? You don't scare me. Temari smirked at him and let go of his collar. That's what I like about you Naruto, blunt and to the point. When I get back I expect you to take me out to dinner and a movie. And you can't be late since we live in the same house. It's brilliant. I don't believe I ever agreed to this little escapade. Temari's smirk grew wider, if that was possible, and sauntered over to him, her hips swinging seductively. Naruto gulped when her hand found its way to his cheek and pressed against his face as she fluttered her eyelashes. But Naruto, I wanted to go on a date with you. Please. Pretty please. She did a victory dance in her head when the poor boy nodded dumbly and she released the hold on his cheek, patting it a couple of times. See, that wasn't so hard now, was it? You're a good guy, Naruto, and I expect to be treated like a queen. Naruto smiled and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. He couldn't believe he let himself be suckered like that. Is there any other way to treat a lady? Temari smiled softly before going back downstairs to her room. For your sake, there better not be another way. You know what I'll do to you afterwards, and that's after I make you promise on a make-up date. She smiled sweetly while she gave her threat and walked downstairs to her bedroom. Naruto sighed in defeat and lay back again to stare at the stars. It seemed a few winked at him, as if they were laughing merrily at his predicament. He walked downstairs and was just about to open his door when Temari poked her head out of hers. Oh, before I forget, you have to dress nice too. We're going to a really nice restaurant. Naruto started to protest before she shut the door and went back to sleep. He grimaced and opened his door, locking it behind him. As he lay down on the bed, he could have sworn he heard the puppet master next door snickering through his wall. Damned eavesdroppers. He picked up his mother's scroll on gardening again and smiled. If he could get a plot of land and the jutsu worked, he'd plant a lot of flowers. Wonder what Temari's favorite flower is.